what you see here is the most amazing animal of all time, mule deer. We are in October right now, which is when the majority of states have their mule deer hunting seasons. It's arguably, you hear it said all the time, hunting mule deer in October is probably one of the most difficult things to do, especially if you're trying to hunt a mature mule deer, but it can be done. So states typically, will have their hunting seasons in October for a reason, especially the rifle seasons, because it is difficult. Okay, these bucks are starting to move out of the high country. They're not becoming as patternable as they were early in the year. They're not hanging out in the open a lot. So we're gonna talk about today tactics for hunting mule deer bucks during the month of October. So it's gonna be all rifle hunting tactics, hunting bucks in October. And yeah, like I said earlier, it's the most difficult time of year to hunt a mule deer. They're not in their summer pattern. They're not rutting. They're in that middle zone of like just being kind of lazy, hanging out in the dark timber all the time. But with that being said, it's not all doom and gloom. For the most part, if you want to just dumb it down, deer are still there. They're still in the area. Most likely, they're still somewhere near where they were in September in the month of October, pretty dang close to it. They're going to move a little bit less. They're going to bed a little bit earlier in the morning, and they're going to, not get out of their bed till later in the evening. They're still going to be somewhere in that area. It is up to you to try to find them. Okay, we're going to talk through the tactics that hopefully help you trying to find them. So when you hear all the time on the internet, doom and gloom, it's not really doom and gloom hunting in October. You still can find some good bucks, and you still can kill, if you're just looking for a kill buck, you can still kill a buck in the month of October. All right, so we just touched on a little bit of why it's difficult and all that stuff. First off, so bucks just move a lot less in the month of October. Okay, there's tons of difference between, hunting a buck in November, maybe you've had a November tag before, compared to October. So you can probably throw a bunch of those tactics in November out the window. They're not going to apply to hunting bucks in October. If you don't have one pattern, you're pretty much shooting yourself in the foot. But there are some things, again, you can do to tip the scales in your favor. So it's not going to be able to do this for everyone, or depending on where you live, but pre-scouting. So pre-scouting could be very important if you have an October mule deer tag. Again, you can scout that for that buck leading up to months of October. So end of September, you can start to scout it. Maybe he's still somewhat, kind of hanging out in the open, still in the bachelor group or some other bucks. You can kind of start to pattern that buck, and then, whenever your season opens in October, maybe you know the exact area he's in. Now he might show up a little bit less, but he's there, and that way when your season opens in October, you can try to kill him right away. So if you can scout, that's probably gonna be your best bet, is to try to kill a buck early, right when that season opens. That way, you put your best foot forward there. That's not always feasible. One of the biggest strategies I have is glass smart, not hard. Okay, you're going to spend almost all your mornings and your evenings glassing. You want to be behind your optics the entire time in the morning and the entire time in the evening, looking for bucks hanging out near that, you've heard me talk a ton of times before about that edge habitat. So you're not looking in fully exposed areas in the open like you would be in August or September. You're now starting to focus on those little fringe habitats, all that edge stuff, from where, either standing timber meets the open, or it could be brush if you're hunting some open country stuff. This is not all just mountain mule deer tactics. It can be just sagebrush country, it can be low country, it can be desert country. So wherever that edge habitat is, that's going to start trying to look for those bucks. Again, bucks are somewhere, you just have to find them. Okay, one of the biggest tips too I'll give you in your glassing is there's probably a ton of country out there that looks like it should hold a buck, but there's not going to be bucks in it. Okay, it's still, again, like I've said earlier, it's your job to find out what areas have bucks. And that's going to come maybe from hunting the same unit over and over again to figure out, okay, which one of these little pockets, which one of these little basins potentially could have mule deer in it, because not all of them are going to have mule deer in it. Okay, so I just mentioned glassing, smart, not hard, working all you can do to, glass as long as you can in the morning and through the afternoon and the evenings, okay? But the biggest tip is going to be glassing all day. All right, this is your hunt. You can literally do whatever you want on your hunt. If it's more of a vacation to you and you want to glass in the morning, go back to camp in the middle of the day, glass in the evening, you can totally do that. Okay, I'm just saying, if you really want to kill a deer, you really want to kill a good deer, you need to be glassing all day. Don't go back to your camp in the middle of the day, glass all day. Okay, the key to glassing all day is going to be, you have to kind of modify your strategy a little bit. You're going to now start to glass into the timber a lot more during the middle of the day. So I'll switch to glassing in my spotting scope, mount high-powered binos on a tripod, glassing into all those shadows, really picking apart the timber, because bucks, for whatever reason, they tend to get up in the timber, they might bed down, and it's that time that you're going to actually kick them up and try to go hunt that deer then, or get moved closer to a position to kill that deer. So glass all day. That's going to be probably one of the biggest tips in here, is literally be glassing all day. And there's going to be other strategies you can do too if you don't want to glass all day, but glassing all day is literally going to put you in a position to find a buck. Okay. Glassing burns. So in October, no matter what, frankly, what time of year it is, I like to glass and hunt burns a lot. So really, again, I'm going to be focusing on a lot of that edge habitat on burn. Set yourself up for success when hunting a burn, is you can kind of pick out glassing spots that might overlook a lot of the burn. It may overlook a lot of like different vegetation types around the burn. So you're not fully focusing on the burn. You might be looking at some other, terrain types, vegetation types nearby. And that way you can maybe glass one spot in the evening, glass again in the morning, kind of start analyzing, okay, are they in the burn? Are they in the edge of burn? Are they in the middle of the burn? Are they not in the burn? Like all those things will start to play out on where you should narrow down your focus. So burns are really, really good for mule deer, especially in the month of October. I've killed a lot of bucks in a burn. I'm going to tell something right now that I don't have any science to back this up, but I do swear that a lot of times deer kind of feel safe when they're in a burn. They see all these trees around them. They feel like they have enough cover. Maybe animals like predators can't see them, or hunters can't see them, and they're just walking around like, hey, but like we're kind of okay. We're in the timber. But as a hunter, if you can get above that burn and kind of glass down that thick burn, all burns aren't the same. Some of them are more open. Some of them are more like densely timber still. They still have the top of their the tree canopies on it, but for the most part they're burned. If you can get down and look into that burn, I think a lot of times those bucks kind of start feeling a little more safe, and then we'll walk around a little bit later in the morning and maybe a little bit earlier in the evening. One of the other good tactics for hunting October is still hunting. This is something that I want to do more of, but it's a really great tactic. If you can't glass anything up and you've been trying to glass middle of the day for multiple days in a row, your eyes are bleeding because you've just been trying to kick up a buck for the longest time, don't get discouraged and just be like, hey, I'm just gonna take a nap or go back to camp. You can just, grab a rifle. Hopefully it's a lighter weight rifle. Like obviously I use a heavy rifle, so I'm at a downside doing this. But you can, still hunt the timber really slowly, trying to analyze where you might think a buck might be bedded and kind of glass it, move slowly through the timber. If you can cut tracks, that's gonna be even better. But if you're really good at still hunting, it can be a great time to utilize that tactic during the month of October. Backpacking. So backpacking could put you towards a really big advantage when it comes to October. Again, these are usually when a lot of tags are giving out, higher tag numbers, so more people can get in the field, more opportunity style hunt. And if you want to separate yourself from everyone else, backpack it. That way you can, get further in there. You can, get more sleep at night because you're right there. You don't have to like wake up super early and hike 2 miles in really steep terrain. You're already up in the whatever country you're hunting and ready to plan attack. So backpacking can be a really great strategy in the month of October. This one's going to tie into some other things we talked about, but patience. Patience is going to be a huge tactic this time of year as well. So just because you glass a ton of country doesn't mean the bucks aren't there. I know this kind of contradicts some other stuff I was saying, where you got to find pockets where there's deer, other places there's going to be no deer. But patience is really going to be a big thing. You can glass a lot of places in the month of October and look it all over, and all of a sudden you're gonna kick up a deer. It's just, they can hide really, really well in October, and again, they're gonna be in that thick timber. I've hunted so many places in the month of October where, like I said, I glassed all day, all of a sudden one random thing happens, a buck stands up in a timber patch and then beds down a few minutes later. I had that hunt a couple years ago where that exact same scenario played out. Thought the whole afternoon, midday was gonna be a wash. Buck literally stood, and I don't know how my binos were on it, but I glassed him up. He instantly bedded back down. Like a couple minutes later, I worked all the way in there, got set up, waited for Buck to stand, shot the buck when he got out of his bed towards the evening. So being able to be patient, glass all that terrain, again, that ties back to some of the other tactics, but glassing all day, just figuring out how to hunt that area and being patient enough to really do your due diligence when you're glassing. So yeah, don't be afraid to stick to an area and glass, and glass some more. When hunting October, I know this is not gonna work for everyone, but you can use weather to your advantage, okay? When it's warm, you like to go to bed earlier and they hide out in the shade all day long. They might not get out of their bed. So if you can figure out maybe a cold snap in the month of October, maybe your hunt plans are flexible, maybe your season date's a little bit longer, and you can kind of plan out when you want to go, Or again, if you have a job where you can just like, hey, give them a week notice and I'm going to go hunt next week because there's going to be a storm coming. Maybe plan your hunt around a storm if you can. That could be a really good factor. When I've had snowstorms in the month of October, it just turns the light switch on, and then I can glass for tracks. I can actually track deer, and then I can glass into all these like dark timbered areas a lot easier with their snow cover on the ground. So being flexible will definitely help you out in the month of October. Also, weather can be a negative side too in the month of October. If you're going to have a bunch of, really hot weather during your October hunt, it could negatively impact it. And I'll give you an example really quick. So, quite a few years ago, I was hunting this buck in October. I actually glassed him up in his bed. I moved close enough to where I could take a shot. I think it was like going to be 350, 400 yards. The buck was in his bed. But the problem was that the topography was making it so I could just see like right at the base of his neck in his antlers, nothing else at all. So literally I had a spot, laid down, I had my gun out, bipod out. We've been laying there all afternoon. Like all this deer has to do is stand up and I'll take the shot and he's dead. There was no other way I could move around him because of the topography. I couldn't get closer. I couldn't get on top of him and shoot. I couldn't loop around him. Didn't want to blow him out of there. It's a really good deer. I literally sat there all evening. All of a sudden now we're like 45 minutes, still dark. He's got to stand. Buck's got to stand. He never stood. And I'm like, I got to start doing something. I started yelling. I even had a coyote call with me, started ripping on a coyote call, trying to get this buck to stand, and he never stood up. This buck was smart enough, knew how to play the game to survive, and was like, why am I going to get up? It's hot out. I don't need to feed around right now. So weather can play a big negative impact. So sometimes in those evenings when you're glassing, you're like, oh, I didn't see any deer. I can cross this off. I really don't like to cross off an area just solely based on evening, because let's say I didn't, glass that buck up perfectly, and maybe I just didn't see him at all. Well, now I could have said, hey, there's no bucks here, and I'm not gonna come back to this spot when there actually could be bucks there, but they're just bedded the entire evening, and that's the whole point of that little story. Is in the evening you literally could have a big buck somewhere in front of you, but he might never get up during daylight. So weather can be a positive, weather can be a negative. So if you can find a snowstorm in October, I would definitely chase storms and try to hunt around the snowstorm if possible. One of the big ones here, you always heard me talk about this one, and people like to poke fun at it, but I think it's probably one of the better strategies when you're hunting in October. It always comes down to, okay, what elevations do you start at when you're hunting the month of October? Do you, because bucks are going to be moving into high country, they're going to start staging in those transition areas. Some bucks might already be kind of in the, potentially a lower area where they might rut. Other bucks might be still high. So where do you go? Do you start high and work your way down the mountain until you find the bucks, or you start low and work your way up? I always prefer to start high and work my way down. Okay? I feel like that's a better strategy to do, because if I can get higher up and let's say I can glass a ton of country from a higher vantage point, I can figure, okay, they're not up here where I'm at, they're not this next little elevation level, but they're finally down this other little elevation band. Now I can hone in on that area and move from the high country down to the low country a lot easier than usually starting lower and like looking up higher, just because you sometimes can't glass that terrain that well from lower to higher. So I prefer to start high and work my way low. One thing I like to add to, like a lot of times, you might have a snow line in October, maybe it has been snowing and you got lucky to catch a snowstorm. Don't be afraid to look higher up in the snow in some of those, timbered basins that have snow on it, or some, bigger basins that might have not as many trees on it. I've always said that some of the biggest and oldest bucks know the game. They're not going to kind of migrate down just because there's snow. They're not worried about getting stuck back there. Bucks are smart. And if they have all the nutritional requirements they need to stay up high, and they want to avoid pressure, where's pressure going to come from? That's the lower areas where ATVs, side-by-sides, horse traffic, wherever it may be. So they're going to stay up there and stage higher and then come down when the rut is. So don't be afraid to hunt high in October, and then figure out if they're there or not there, and then modify your strategy as need be. You don't want to be sitting there glassing below the snow line and all there is a bunch of dinks, bunch of nursery areas, a bunch of does and fawns. Try to search out those old mature deer if that's what you're after, which is normally what I'm trying to find. So I'm not afraid to start high and work my way lower. Another big tip for hunting in October, again, depends on what kind of state you're hunting with, what season it has. So if you can hunt majority of the month of October, that earlier part is probably going to be a lot more difficult unless you've already done some pre-scouting like we talked about earlier. So big strategy for hunting October, if you have the means to, probably be hunting late October. You have a higher chance of big buck movement later in October. It might be colder temperatures. You might have a little bit more pre-rut activity. and snowfall and all that stuff could make bucks move on their feet more. So hunting that later part could give you a little bit of an edge. And a lot of times too, you could see bucks in late October that literally you've been looking at, earlier in the year, and they just are there, but you just don't see them. But all of a sudden late October, they for whatever reason are starting to move around more because of that pre-rut or because of the snowfall, and it's that urge to try to find does and move down a little bit. So that's why that late October timeframe can be really, really good. I've seen, a lot of people say, mule deer bucks, they can kind of start pre-rut around like October 20th, all the way through, that Halloween time frame. So if you can, figure out your schedule and you want to just pick one time frame to hunt in October, have a certain amount of vacation days to burn, maybe it might be best to schedule your hunt and do a 5-day, a 7-day hunt, whatever it may be, towards that later part of October. And that you might put yourself in a higher chance to kill a buck, okay? But keep in mind too, that when you think about that strategy, again, you're always trying to think about how other hunters could approach this as well. You have that idea, they might have that same idea. They want to be hunting in the snow. They want to be higher chance for some pre-rut activity. So maybe more hunters are going to hunt that later part. And if you could hunt the earlier part of October, less people in the field. Yes, it's going to be a harder chance to find a deer, but maybe then if you decide to hunt that early part of October, maybe you should put in more days prior to that, doing some actual boots on the ground scouting to figure out where a buck is, hone in on his area, and try to kill him in the early part of October. So there's a lot of different strategies in October. Again, it's not all doom and gloom. Glass is going to be your friend. Get a big spotting scope, big optics. I should have said big binoculars mounted on a tripod, and glass. Work through the timber, glass all the thick stuff. Don't be afraid of hunting thick terrain. A lot of times those bucks are gonna go into terrain that is thick, hard to glass, not big open pockets. You're gonna be glassing tiny little areas. A lot of times that's where the bucks are gonna feel safe. So it might seem like, hey, I'm only glassing an area that's 100 yards wide. Well, that could be the area that the buck his home range is, and that's his little spot right there. And you have to glass that 100-yard area to kind of catch them moving around. So don't feel like you need to have giant big basins to glass or big open sagebrush country. A lot of times just figure out where that brush is, figure out where that thickest, nastiest area is, kind of pick it apart and kind of modify your strategy, but don't just stick to one strategy in October. And look at all these tips and try to combine as many of them as you can. Be patient, glass all the time, hunt all day. I think that's one of the biggest ones again, and then try to pick out your season, but when you want to hunt in the month of October. And hopefully a bunch of these tips, combine them all together, will put you in a great chance to find a giant buck in October. Not doom and gloom, you can find them. And best of luck to everyone hunting October. And I hope you guys have a successful hunt, can use some of these tips when you're on the field. Have any questions, as always, drop them in the comments below, and send in your photos. I always love seeing big buck photos. And if you're getting out in October, I'm jealous because that means you're hunting deer. So again, best of luck, and catch you guys next time.